Diane taught high school English for 31 years. She retired with a paid-off house, zero debt, and a pension covering every bill she'd ever have. By every number on a spreadsheet, she'd done everything right. 6 months in, she caught herself calling her old department chair, someone she used to complain about, just to talk to another adult before noon. She didn't miss the grading. She missed being needed. Her biggest regret wasn't a bad investment. It was believing that financial readiness was the only readiness that mattered. That story repeats itself, with different names and different pensions, across millions of American households every year. People spend 40 years preparing their money for retirement and almost no time preparing their life for it. The advice that actually changes outcomes rarely comes from a textbook. It comes from people who've already lived the transition, who know which fears turned out real and which turned out to be noise. Retirement was never only a money question. It's a health question, a relationship question, a question of purpose and freedom, and how you spend the one truly non-renewable resource you have, time. The lessons ahead come from patterns retirees describe again and again, in different words but with the same underlying regret or relief. If you're finding this useful so far, I'm John. Subscribe to this channel for more educational finance documentaries that help you build wealth, prepare for retirement, and make smarter financial decisions. Walter ran the floor of a sheet metal plant outside Toledo for 26 years. He'd done the retirement math 100 times. Pension, Social Security, a modest 401k, and it looked fine on paper. What he hadn't priced in was what his actual days would cost. Home projects he'd delayed for someday, a grandkids' travel baseball weekends, restaurant lunches replacing decades of free cafeteria food. None of it was reckless. It simply wasn't in a plan built around his old paycheck instead of his new life. This is the quiet miscalculation almost every new retiree makes, budgeting for the retirement they imagine instead of the one they'll actually live. A retirement lifestyle has a real number attached to it: housing, hobbies, healthcare. The small daily choices that add up over 365 days. Before you retire, track what a genuine month of your ideal retirement week would cost, not what your current budget assumes. Then, build your retirement income. Social Security, pensions, 401k, or IRA withdrawals around that real number. Harold delivered mail on the same route for 34 years. Everyone on his street knew him. The week after he retired felt like a well-earned vacation. Then the vacation feeling wore off, and there was nothing underneath it. Harold had retired from something. He'd never retired to anything. This is one of the least discussed risks in retirement, because it isn't financial. It's an identity risk. For decades, a job answers, "What do you do?" without you ever thinking about it. Remove the job, and the question sits unanswered. Retirees who struggle emotionally are rarely the ones without enough money. They're often the ones without a reason to get up. Build your retire to list years before your last paycheck, a project, a volunteer role, a skill, so the morning after retirement already has a purpose waiting in it. Rosalind worked labor and delivery for nearly 30 years, on her feet through overnight shifts. She always said she'd take care of her health after retirement when I finally have time. By the time she retired, 2 knees needed replacing and her chart read pre-diabetic. She had the time now. She no longer fully had the body to use it with. Health is the one asset that can't be rebuilt with a good investment year. Money lost can often be earned back. Mobility and independence lost in your 60s frequently cannot. Healthcare costs and quality of life both scale directly with how well your body is functioning going in. Treat the years before retirement as training for the next 30, prioritizing movement, sleep, and checkups the same way you'd prioritize maxing out a Roth IRA. Gary wired houses for a living, physically demanding work that ages a body fast. He always meant to see the Grand Canyon, hike the Appalachian Trail, take his wife somewhere with an ocean, pushing the trip back 2 years, then 5, telling himself it would still be there once he'd saved more. At 68, A hip injury ended the hiking plans, and travel became a question of medication logistics instead of adventure. Money and mobility don't age at the same rate. Financial capacity tends to grow the longer you wait. Physical capacity tends to shrink. Waiting for the perfect travel budget can quietly cost you the years you actually had the stamina to enjoy it. Sequence your bucket list by physical demand, not account size. Tackle the hardest trips earliest in retirement, not last. Patricia ran a small bakery for over 20 years before selling it. She'd saved diligently and felt confident walking away. What she hadn't accounted for was the gap between leaving at 62 and Medicare eligibility at 65, 3 years of buying private insurance that ate through savings faster than budgeted. Healthcare is the most underestimated line item in retirement because while you're working, an employer absorbs most of the real cost. You never see the true price. In retirement, you see all of it: premiums, deductibles, prescriptions, and the bridge years before Medicare if you retire early. Financial professionals generally suggest retiring couples budget well into 6 figures over their lifetime for healthcare alone. Research your specific bridge: COBRA, marketplace insurance, a spouse's plan, years before you leave work so it's priced in rather than discovered after the fact. Frank drove long-haul freight for over 3 decades, work that pays steadily but rarely offers a pension. Social Security became the largest piece of his retirement income, and for a while that felt fine, until a rough market year spooked him into pulling savings faster than planned, revealing just how thin the cushion actually was. Social Security was designed as a foundation, not a full income. It replaces a percentage of pre-retirement earnings that's often smaller than people expect, and depending on it entirely leaves you exposed to funding uncertainty and a check that doesn't stretch once inflation hits. Retirees who feel most secure treat Social Security as one leg of a table, alongside savings, a 401k or IRA, rather than the entire table. Yolanda spent her career as an accountant, meticulous with other people's numbers, yet carried a mortgage and car payment straight into retirement. "I'll just pay it from my income," she used to say. What she hadn't priced in was that retirement income is fixed in a way a salary isn't. No annual raise arrives to absorb rising payments. Debt behaves differently once your income stops growing. A mortgage payment manageable on a working salary can quietly become the single biggest strain on a fixed one. Aggressively target high interest and large fixed debts in the years leading into retirement. Treat debt-free as its own milestone, alongside any savings number. Bernard designed industrial equipment and trusted his math implicitly. He calculated his savings, held steady, would comfortably cover 3 decades. What the math hadn't weighed was inflation, the slow, steady rise in cost that means $1 today buys noticeably less a decade from now. Inflation doesn't announce itself with one painful moment. It erodes purchasing power quietly, a % or 2 at a time, until groceries and insurance cost dramatically more than when the plan was built. A retirement that starts comfortable can turn tight 20 years in if the income isn't structured to grow, which is why many retirement plans keep some money invested rather than moving entirely to cash. Eleanor spent her career as a librarian, surrounded daily by co-workers and regulars. Retirement brought an abrupt quiet. Her children lived states away, and the friendships she assumed would carry over from work faded once the workplace disappeared. 2 years in, her biggest surprise was simply how lonely retirement could feel. Loneliness in retirement isn't a failure to plan. It's a structural risk since work provides built-in daily contact most people never replace on purpose. Isolation is consistently linked to declines in both mental and physical health, making relationships a genuine health issue. Build recurring social structure before retirement begins: a standing group, a volunteer commitment, regular visits, rather than assuming connection happens on its own. Arthur worked as a machinist, solving mechanical problems daily for 3 decades. Retirement removed those problems, and within a year he noticed himself feeling foggier, slower to recall names, less sharp in conversations he used to enjoy. Cognitive engagement doesn't retire just because a career does. The brain weakens without regular use, like a muscle. Retirees who stay mentally active through new skills, reading, or genuinely challenging hobbies consistently report sharper memory than those who let structured effort disappear with the job. Choose at least one activity that demands real thought, and keep it in the weekly routine long after the retirement party ends. Sylvia patrolled the same city for 22 years before retiring to a small coastal town, chosen purely because the listing photos looked appealing. She hadn't checked how far the nearest hospital was, how thin transportation options were, or how much the cost of living would climb. 3 years in, distance to specialist care became a daily worry. Where you retire is a financial decision disguised as a lifestyle one. Weather matters, but healthcare access, transportation, proximity to family, and long-term cost of living shape both quality of life and monthly budget in ways a vacation visit won't reveal. Spend real time, a full season, not a weekend, in a potential location before committing. Dennis served over 2 decades in the military before a long civilian career, and later found himself constantly measuring his modest retirement against a neighbor's bigger house and more frequent vacations. That comparison, more than any real shortfall, quietly drained his happiness year after year. Comparison is one of the most underrated threats to a satisfying retirement. It measures your life against someone else's highlight reel instead of your own priorities. 2 retirees with wildly different account balances can have equally fulfilling retirements, or equally miserable ones, depending on whether spending matches their own values. Define what a good retirement means for you before comparing it to anyone else's version. Carol worked as a hairdresser for nearly 40 years, talking with clients all day. She'd always meant to pick up painting again, once things slowed down. But when retirement arrived, she realized she'd never built the habit. The free time felt strange rather than freeing. Hobbies don't appear automatically once work ends. They're routines that need to be established beforehand, the same way a savings habit needs to be built before you can rely on it. Retirees who transition smoothly are usually the ones already doing their hobbies part-time while working, so retirement simply expanded something familiar. Start building hobbies now, in small doses, long before the free time arrives. Theodore ran a small hardware store for most of his adult life, and, after selling it, moved his savings into investments a friend recommended, with little research behind it. A rough market stretch, combined with withdrawing faster than planned, left his savings shrinking faster than expected. Protecting retirement savings comes down to unglamorous habits. An emergency fund separate from invested savings, so a bad month doesn't force you to sell at a loss. A diversified mix of investments instead of one concentrated bet. And a disciplined withdrawal strategy instead of pulling money reactively. Many retirees benefit from a fee-only advisor stress-testing their plan against different market conditions before they commit to it. And then there's Ruth, who farmed the same land for 50 years alongside her husband. Ruth never had a large 401k or an impressive portfolio. What she had was decades of Sunday dinners, mornings spent exactly how she wanted, a retirement built around presence instead of accumulation. Asked what she'd tell someone approaching retirement, she didn't mention numbers at all. She said the thing she wished she'd understood sooner was that time spent is worth more than time saved. That's the lesson underneath all the others. Retirement isn't measured by the account balance on the day you stop working. It's measured by how deliberately you spent the years on both sides of that day. The health you protected, the relationships you kept close, the purpose you built, the moments you didn't put off for someday. Money buys the freedom to choose how your time is spent. It was never the point of retirement. It was only ever the tool. Diane eventually found her answer too. Not in a pension statement, but in a part-time role tutoring students who couldn't afford private help. The paycheck didn't matter. Being needed again did. That's what 15 retirees in 15 different lives all discovered the hard way. The account balance was never the finish line. How you spent your time always was.